CWB Chicago has this one. A man accused of carjacking a woman while awaiting trial for being a felon in possession of a firearm will not serve any time in an Illinois prison after pleading guilty in both cases. Say what now? A man accused of carjacking a woman while awaiting trial for being a felon. Thank you, Pritzker Purge Law Safety Act. He's out pending felony trial, and he commits another felony. Preventable crime, preventable victims. While the being a felon in possession of, and he's a convicted felon on top of it, while being a felon in possession of a firearm while he was awaiting trial on that charge, he was involved in a violent carjacking incident 2 years later. By the way, this guy is a very colorful character, a lot of face tattoos, including over his left eyebrow that says Chuck, though that's not his name. I don't know. Maybe that's a gang thing. I don't know. He's got a pitchfork on the left side of his cheek. He's got what looks like a skeleton or maybe the Grim Reaper holding up a submachine gun on his left cheek and other such adornments on his neck and so on and so forth. So I don't think he's returning to corporate America anytime soon, despite the fact that he's not serving any jail time. So how does that happen? I'm so glad you asked. He was given 4-year sentences for each of the charges, the felon in possession of a gun, as well as the violent carjacking, but they are to run concurrently, being served at the same time, of course. His 4-year sentence was reduced to 2 years, and he received credit for the 848 days he spent in jail awaiting trial after he being a convicted felon, committed the felony while waiting trial for felony. Then they put him behind bars. They held him pending trial. And so given the 4-year sentence immediately being reduced to 2 and the credit for time served awaiting trial on these matters, he's satisfied with the required time in a sentence, and he's back on the street. One of the people responsible for this culture that doesn't get enough credit, the credit she deserves, is Toni Preckwinkle. Toni Preckwinkle. She's the Cook County Board president, you may have heard, and a dead ringer from Grady from the Sanford and Son, if you're not familiar with her. And she's on the ballot on Tuesday, if you're pulling a Dem ballot. She's got a primary challenger, serious one, for the first time in probably since the first time she ran. Paul Vallas, Senior Policy Advisor for Illinois Policy Institute, writes weekly for the Chicago Contrarian, former CEO of CPS and candidate for mayor, joins us now. Paul, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. You know, I did a post just this week on Preckwinkle, actually just the other day. Did you know that since 2020, CWB reports that there have been 461 individuals arrested for murder or attempted murder who were out on bail awaiting trial for other felonies. And let me point out that that's probably only a fraction of the crimes committed by those who were out on felony bail, because remember, the police have only arrested over the last 10 years about a third of those individuals who committed murder, and only about 5% of those individuals who have committed non-lethal shootings. So we can thank Toni Preckwinkle for that. I mean, just imagine 461, and that number is probably over a couple thousand. If you apply those percentages to the actual number of murders and attempted murders.
But it doesn't seem that those matters are winning, in terms of addressing those matters, doesn't seem that that is winning the day among the Chicago electorate. Perhaps that will change on Tuesday. She's got a serious primary challenge from Alderman Brendan Riley. How do you handicap that race?
Well, the polls that I've seen, and there was a poll that was circulating in Springfield, has Riley slightly ahead. But then when I ran against Brandon Johnson, I was slightly ahead going into the election too. It all depends on turnout. I mean, there's a reason they have the elections when they have them. The timing is all designed to suppress voter turnout. And then, of course, the union is up to its old tricks. They're registering kids to vote, and they're busing them and Chicago Public School buses to the polls. Obviously, not to vote for Brendan Riley. So they're going to be up to their old tricks. I imagine that they've got people in the retirement homes and the nursing homes filling out absentee ballots as they did in the campaign, in my campaign. So, how would I handicap it? I think right now it's a toss-up, but it's all going to depend on voter turnout.
Yeah, in that case, I certainly give the advantage to Tony, not because of the union singular, but because of the government unions plural, SIU, AFSCME, and the teachers union, of course. She is their gal and vice versa, and not to mention, the institutional inertia of the Cook County employees, many of whom are in one of those government unions, to keep the perches they have now without interruption. There's a lot of incentive to, to back the status quo or the identitarian politics that supports the current status quo, and it just doesn't seem like there's anybody that has been able to bust that to this point.
Yeah. Well, one would hope that the fury over the dramatic increase in property taxes, particularly residential property taxes, might compel people to just go to the polls. I mean, we all recall that of course, this was a Chicago mayoral's race, that when she was in a one-on-one with Lori Lightfoot, I mean, Lightfoot won every single ward. I think Lightfoot got more than 70% of the votes. So she's never really had a serious candidate. Ryan is a serious candidate. He's very accomplished. He's very smart. He's raised a lot of money. He's bought a lot of TV time. So one would hope that the fact that aggregate property taxes in the county went up a record $1 billion this year, and that the poorest communities in the city, particularly those on the west and south side, predominantly black communities, saw some of their taxes increase as much as 100%. One would think that this broken property tax system and the burden it's imposing on residents, both homeowners and renters, would compel people to use their vote to send a message that it's time for change.
Getting back to the public safety piece for a moment, the new CTA safety plan that was unveiled at the prompting of the Department of Transportation. So this effort to enhance safety on the CTA, I know they'll bristle at this notion, but Chicago residents and CTA riders have Trump to thank for it. I don't know that it's the best plan in terms of what they presented, but it's certainly devoting more police and resources to public safety on the platforms and on the trains. Probably better just to put more Chicago police officers on the force and on the platforms and the trains than violence interrupters and all this other business. But it is still moving in a direction towards enhancing public safety, and it's only because President Trump threatened to withhold funds if they didn't come up with such a plan.
Right.
What's your assessment of the plan?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely correct. Had the U.S. Department of Transportation, Trump's appointee, not threatened to withhold funds, they would have never provided for a greater investment. But the plan is still woefully inadequate. So, apparently what they've done is they've increased the full-time number of Chicago police assigned to the CTA from, I think, about 135 to 180. Let me point out that the mayor's police detail is, I think, about 150. So it kind of gives you perspective. Now they are doubling the number of what they call volunteer police officers who work voluntarily on their time off, obviously for overtime. And then, of course, the sheriff's going to be dispatching some police. I mean, the bottom line is, so what do we have? We have part-time police. We have these untrained, unarmed, no power of arrest, private security, and we have 180 officers. to basically cover the second largest transit system in the country. And so it's New York, by contrast, has 3,500 full-time police officers assigned. Now, somebody might say that, well, it's a money issue, it's a financial issue, but if you took the $87 million that they spend on public safety and combine it, and that includes the money spent on private security, and combine it with the close to $100 million in public safety grants that are in the transportation bailout bill, which is really a CTA bailout bill, most of which will go to the CTA, they could probably add another 500, 600, maybe even as many as 700 additional full-time police officers to the CTA to cover the stations, to cover the bus routes, to cover to walk the platforms. But there's just something about adding more police that it's simply not in the mayor's DNA. He really is openly hostile to more police. So they could do much better. It's not a money issue, it's an allocation issue. So we're still going to be woefully understaffed in terms of the number of full-time police assigned. And the part-time security, well, you've seen them. People are constantly posting them running away or dodging or just standing by while crime is being committed on the CTA. And I just want to mention one thing, if I can. Despite the dramatic decrease in crime on citywide, which is a national decrease, and I think the new state's attorney Riley is a big reason. O'Neill is a big reason. Eileen O'Neill Burke is a major reason for that. The CTA crime, violent crime in CTA, has surged by 33% this year, and per capita, it's at 3 times the level of violence that it was 10 years ago. So the CTA remains kind of a dangerous ride.
Kind of, yeah. And with respect to some of those like violence interrupters, the favorite funding, the favored organizations that BLM Brandon does like to fund, unlike police. We also have had a number of incidents where we need to have people, violence interrupters, to protect us from the violence interrupters. Some of these violence interrupters still can't color inside the lines. They haven't really given up their previous lifestyle, and so we've had problems there as well. I wanted to get your commentary, though, as well on the federal tax credit scholarship program. I know, of course, you're a big school choice proponent, and there's this opportunity that Colorado Governor Gerald Polis, who's a Democrat, has taken advantage of, saying, why would I not want free money to funnel into my schools to give kids more resources and more choices? Pretty sensible conclusion he draws from this in this tax credit scholarship program that President Trump has set up at the federal level. But that's not the position of Governor Pritzker, is it?
No, he claims that he's undecided, but clearly I think he's reluctant to go against the teacher unions, who are just not only in Chicago but statewide, but nationally. They're just lobbying against a program that, incidentally, these are 100% tax credits up to a maximum $1,700 annually. And the estimates are, these are Arnie Duncan's estimates. He did an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, or in the Washington Post, I should say. Clearly not a MAGA guy. He basically said that the scholarship in Illinois could generate well over $900 million in scholarship monies that would not only go to pay for private school tuition for middle and lower income families, but it would also go to pay for public and private school tutors, transportation, special education supports, if families are in need of those supports, homeschooling, curriculum and instructional materials. So they're going to be foregoing, courtesy of President Trump, close to $900 million in additional monies that will go to both public school and private school families, simply because the union does not want any money, any additional funding to go to private schools. I mean, that's it. So they would literally forego that, which is, in effect, free money. It won't take a dime away from public schools. They would rather kill that scholarship program than take full advantage of the monies that would be available through the scholarship.
All right, for me, but not for thee. The Pritzker undecided thing is hilarious. What is there to decide? You're either for it or against it. But this is his, he did the same thing, as you know, with the tax credit scholarship program at the state level. When he's running, I'm not going to kill it. Then he kills it. He has Welch and his buddies in the General Assembly kill it, and then he plays Pontius Pilate. So he's completely in the bag for the teachers' unions because he's looking to run for president in 2028, and he wants to enjoy their support, no question.
Yeah, there's no question at all. It's really criminal that they are not taking advantage of a program that would be of enormous benefit to families, both public and private school families, but they don't give a damn about the kids that they get. Look, if they cared about the kids, they wouldn't have kept schools closed for 78 consecutive weeks. If you remember, during COVID, the Chicago Public Schools remained closed about a year after it was pretty much demonstrated that there was no danger of schools reopening. And incidentally, during that period, almost 800 Chicago public school children out of school, children who were not in school, were shot, and I think 127 were murdered over the 2 years in which the schools were closed for 78 consecutive weeks. It was really tragic. And nothing in the media about that.
Mm-hmm. No, the tragedy continues. Paul Vallas, Senior Policy Advisor, Illinois Policy Institute, writes weekly for the Chicago Contrarian, also a former CEO of CPS and former mayoral candidate, of course. Paul, thanks, as always. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. And Paul joins us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer. Don't miss In Grace with Pastor Jim Scudder Jr., now heard on Sunday mornings at 7:30. Tune in.